Terry, thanks for coming on the podcast, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Cooper. Looking forward to hearing what questions you're going to throw at me this morning.
Mate, Queensland Cricket CEO, spent 8 years at Queensland Cricket, your fifth year now as CEO. How do you manage to run such a successful product in what is a very easily scrutinised position?
Yeah, it probably is scrutinised, isn't it? Queensland Cricket, I guess, has got probably two parts to the business. The first part really is to promote and grow participation. So running cricket programs throughout the state to get more girls and boys and playing cricket. And that's really one part of our organisation. And the other part, the second part of our organisation is the Brisbane Heat, which has been incredibly successful off the field, and we're starting to have more success on the field. The Brisbane Heat's a wonderful brand. We've got some wonderful sponsors. But it's an opportunity for us, another way to attract girls and boys to cricket. So, for us, we're a large organisation. Cricket's a really popular sport, and we want to make it more popular here in Queensland.
Mate, you've had a very successful and extensive career off the back of developing an aspiration and bringing it to life. And my question is, as the last 4 years as a CEO, what's the most important mission statement, goal that you've had as Queensland Cricket CEO that you've been able to put into place?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I started at Queensland Cricket, firstly on the committee of the Brisbane Heat, the advisory committee, and then stepped onto the board and then stepped into the role of CEO. And I guess during that time, I've had some really good insights from business, but also being able to bring that skill set into the organisation as well. And taking a look at our purpose was really important. We did have a purpose that was around connecting communities, and connecting communities is really important. But one of the things that we needed to focus on is what our true purpose was, and that was something that was born more recently in terms of our purpose. It was promoting and growing the game, so that whether you're a fan or whether you're a participant, you get to really enjoy the game itself. I think that was one of the first things, and that drives a lot of our activities. The second piece that we launched about 18 months ago is the Queensland Cricket Foundation, and that's our philanthropic arm. That effectively is a fundraising activity to make the game more accessible. And there's 4 areas in our Queensland Cricket Foundation that we're focusing on. The first part being raising money to spend in the areas of women and girls. The second area is around Indigenous cricketers. The third area is around infrastructure, and we know that if we continue to invest in infrastructure and have the best facilities, girls and boys will come and play the game. And then lastly, being able to play a role in giving or allowing underprivileged kids to come and watch their heroes play, wherever that might be through Queensland.
Mate, all sports teams, the big question that everyone asks is, what is their culture? And you see with the great teams, the Melbourne Storm, under Craig Bellamy, the early Broncos days, what's so important about culture in Queensland Cricket's perspective there?
Yeah, look, culture's important whether it's on or off the field. And for us, from a cultural point of view, it's about accountability, it's about transparency, it's about providing feedback at the right time, both encouragement and feedback that things need to improve, whether it's a certain stroke a batter will play, or if it's a fielding technique. But that not only just applies to our teams that play on the field and are in the public spotlight, it's also behind the scenes from an administration point of view. And defining what your role and responsibility is in the organisation, whether you're a player or whether you're part of the wider network of staff that we have across Queensland. But I think role definition, roles and responsibilities, accountability, be clear on purpose, and all to be worked towards a common goal as an organisation are, I guess, some of those critical components that make a good organisation even better.
Mate, I got down here the role of the CEO, and for you personally, the role of the CEO is to set the vision of what he or the board want to achieve, execute the vision, and to keep all the stakeholders happy. So if in your case, it's the players management, the fans, all these different past players, the media, everyone involved, and at the forefront of that is you. So my question to you, mate, is in your role, how do you manage success? And what do you measure as success? Is it to see the fans happy? Is it to see players happy? Is it all the above? Is it winning comps? Is it sending a positive message to the media? Is it having good media attention? How do you measure success in your role?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it might sound a bit cliche, but having the right people around you, for you as a CEO to recognise what your strengths and weaknesses are, and the things that you need to do differently, and be able to complement or supplement that with having the right leadership group around you, whether it's on or off the field. We're a member-based organisation as well. We rely heavily on volunteers throughout the state. There's about 140,000 registered cricket participants. There's a lot of people that are involved in cricket, and that's just the registered players. But there's volunteers. There's people out on a Saturday morning rolling the wicket. There's people preparing to come and run a canteen, for instance. So I think it's my point there is more seek to understand, to be able to understand what's important to people, and to be able to put the right actions in place to be able to have a united group to bring cricket to life in this state. I think it comes back to something I talked about a little bit earlier, roles and responsibilities. Yep. Our key measures, for instance, I guess there's 5 key measures that we have in our strategic plan that the management team and the board have aligned on. The first one really is around growing participation. How do we get more girls and boys into the funnel to be able to enjoy this lifelong game? So growing participation is incredibly important to us. Infrastructure's a focus to us as well. Queensland Cricket provides seed funding along with clubs and associations and all levels of state government, where we identify where are our key areas that we want to invest in, whether it's upgrading nets in a training facility in Cairns or Rockhampton or Gladstone. How do we work with schools to upgrade cricket facilities in schools? So infrastructure's the second main area. The third area is around having better teams and players, and that talks to winning competitions. It's not always about winning competitions, it's about how we go about winning, and that talks to skill set and also culture. But to continue to attract sponsors and partners into our organisation, particularly around the Brisbane Heat, we need to make sure that we are winning, that we continue to highlight our brand and amplify our sponsors' brands at the same time. And the other couple of areas also relate then to capability in our organisation, making sure that we've got the right people in the right roles, and we're focusing on the financial sustainable health of our organisation. And the fifth area is around entertainment. And entertainment, for us, is being able to entertain fans when they come to the Gabba or Allan Border Field, or up in Cairns where we had the first ever Big Bash game last year, to be able to attract fans to our game. And hopefully the byproduct of that will be young girls and boys will want to sign up to cricket. So those 5 key areas are our strategic pillars, which have been aligned or are aligned between management and board and the whole organisation.
Yeah, sure. A lot of the comments online are surrounding the Brisbane Heat social media team, and it's quite different to what the vast majority of teams do, and it's obviously working in some rate. And I remember you saying before that you've got the largest following on social media for any team franchise in the Southern Hemisphere, and it sort of goes back to the point of the grassroots. And obviously Queensland Cricket have such a large emphasis on grassroots. So my question is, how have you improved and enhanced fan engagement? Because at the end of the day, players play sport for the fans, really. So how important is the grassroots system to you to not only develop the next generation of players, but also just in fan engagement itself for the Gabba?
Yeah, as I said, above all, growing participation is probably one of our core focus areas. And to do that, there's a number of different ways that we can do that. And part of it is about player accessibility. Fan days, for instance, that our players are accessible, to be able to hear their story, and we've, whether that's on social media or whether that's face to face. So, the communication channel that we've chosen really to build our skill and expertise in, and it is working. And that comment that you made about, the Brisbane Heat. So the Brisbane Heat have the largest social media following of any sports code across any team in Oceania, which is a significant number when you start to think some of those other great sporting teams that we see across Australia, whether it's in AFL or whether it's in rugby league or rugby union or even basketball. Excuse me. So for us, that's what we've invested in. We've got the best talent in the industry running our social media campaigns and our digital campaigns. I think that allows us to be closer to the consumer and ultimately to the fan. And we're hoping in many instances that fan also then turns into a player to actually help us grow participation through the state. And we are a one-state team, the Brisbane Heat. For us, we're one club, two teams, and our partners and sponsors that we have in the women's team are the same in the men's team. And that's important to us to provide a united front, but equally that unity goes a long way to helping us grow participation.
And on the flip side of that, there's you're a professional sport team, and at the end of the day, you're going to have media critics, you're going to have fan critics as well. And on the side of crisis management, just say there's a player or a fan a player or someone internally does something wrong that gets out in the media. My question is, how do you deal with and manage with a crisis management situation like that?
Yeah, good question. Look, the journalists, for instance, you have to remember only doing their job, asking questions, and we certainly, and I am respectful, and we as an organisation are respectful, of the journalists and broadcasters and those that work in the media. They're a talented group of individuals doing their job in terms of chasing stories down, and I think in one instance, it's great when you're having conversation around positive news, but equally you've got to front up and explain the situation if there's negative news as well, whatever that might be, from decisions that we might take on some players, for instance, whether they continue to play in our squad or not, or any other activities that we might be confronted with. Our approach from a crisis management point of view is to be able to have a number of things, working in parallel. I guess the first thing we need to do is that we need to understand the facts. And we often know, from a media point of view, there's certain deadlines that people need to meet. So if we're not in a position, if we don't have all the facts, we don't typically comment, but we make sure that we try and get those facts and we keep our media partners involved all the way along to make sure that aspects of what we're trying to communicate are fully transparent.
Internally speaking, in regards to that, to run a successful business, particularly in the public eye, you got to have perfect communication. So off the back of that, how important is it for you to have the hard conversations with people to get a message across in what is such a scrutinised position?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things to that. I've always lived by this philosophy that transparency builds trust, and we certainly during changes that our sporting organisation and other sporting organisations needed to make through COVID. Our intent going into that was to make sure that everyone had all of the information as best we knew at the time, whether that was lockdown, whether cricket was being able to be played or not, or whether it was restructures that we needed to make in our organisation that have been sort of well documented. But I think you build trust in your playing group and you bring trust in your employees if they know that you're delivering your message in an authentic way that is fully transparent. There's sometimes we can't talk through all the information because we don't necessarily have all the facts, but fact gathering, being decisive, laying options out and saying this is our recommendation is incredibly important. From a communication point of view, our key staff and our players all have media training. And part of the media training also puts them under pressure in terms of certain questions and how they would act in answering those questions. And I think we always want to try and have that level of authenticity, transparency, and to be as clear and concise, whether it's our employees, whether it's our members, or whether it's our fans. And that's the approach that we aim to take at Queensland Cricket and the Brisbane Heat.
You talk about, in your answer there, about delivering messages authentically and transparent. There's a term in sports psych called emotional intelligence, and I'll give you an example. Wayne Bennett is the best at this term. He knows his players that well that he can get performance out of someone by either taking his arm around his shoulder or absolutely spraying someone, and he knows his players that well that he'll get that message and that performance out of him. My question is, how important for you is player relations? And obviously, in your position, player relations is really important because players want to come and obviously have to play for you, under you, essentially. So how important is that for you as CEO?
Yeah, look, I think as the leader of the organisation, I think it's really important to have a strong relationship with each of our playing group, whether it's our pathway players, whether it's our up-and-coming under 17 or under 19 women's and men's team to know what the future looks like. I think, secondly, also having understanding of my role and my responsibility without overreaching, because ultimately the coaches of our men's and women's program have the closest contact, but equally as a fresh pair of eyes. I certainly won't be talking to players about shot selection, how they're bowling or batting. But what I'm interested in is culture, process and systems. Some would say all the boring stuff, but at the heart of a successful organisation in terms of how we run it, you've got to have a great back office to be able to make sure that the right decisions are being made, and players and fans are at the heart of many of our decisions. So I've got strong connections with each one of our playing group, whether it's on the women or men's side. I want them to be able to feel comfortable to at any point in time come and have a conversation. And we have many outstanding leaders, both in our women's and men's program, but our women's program to be captained by Jess Jonathan, and our men by Usman Khawaja. We're really lucky that we've got two wonderful leaders in the Queensland and Brisbane Heat teams.
Yeah. Sort of brings me to another question for you, man. And I'm cautious of time here. What's the main thing that you've seen change over your time at Queensland Cricket, just as CEO, calling all the shots? And it leads me to another question: what's been your biggest challenge as CEO? What's something that you've changed personally that you've seen change, and then your biggest challenge in that?
Yeah, I think there's I'd probably say a couple of things. The biggest thing that we're now focusing on is this obsession around growing participation, making sure that cricket is more accessible for girls and boys. And that typically has to be outside of the traditional Saturday morning cricket.
Yep.
What we talk a lot about is how do we grow participation, and there's many factors to that. And one of those things is, a different time of the week or a different time of the day. And that might mean that we play short form cricket on a Tuesday night rather than a Saturday morning. So, we've got to listen to our consumer, we've got to listen to our fans, and we've got to find a way to be able to grow participation amongst, many challenges that, the environment throws up from time to time.
Yep.
I'd say secondly to that, you said what's one of the first things that we've done differently. I think the second thing is there's been a much stronger focus on financial sustainability, particularly within Queensland Cricket. And, for us, cricket will always be at the heartland of what we do, but equally we have to fund our aspirations.
Yep.
80% of our funds comes from Cricket Australia.
Yep.
And upwards of 80% of their funds or revenue that come into the organisation come from media rights. So it's quite a narrow funnel. The other 20% comes through ticket sales and corporate memberships and sponsorship and partnership that we have. So if you had a business and you had one customer that made up 80% of your sales, in a way, that's a financial risk. So for us, 80% of our income coming into Queensland cricket comes from Cricket Australia. So one of the things that the board and the management team are focusing on is how do we diversify income? How do we get more income into Queensland cricket and find new ways to bring that in to be able to then reinvest in running programs throughout Queensland. We're a not-for-profit, and it's important to be able to fund our aspirations and have long-term sustainability of our sport. What was one of the most challenging times? No doubt COVID.
Yeah.
And we had close to 40 people leave our organisation through no fault of their own. Wonderful employees that just given affordability and the financial impact on sport, and we weren't unique, but we that was difficult, as a leader. But as we worked through it, we needed to make sure that we understood the situation. Given it was developing times, we didn't know when cricket was going to be back, like many other organisations throughout the world. But we had to make the right decisions at the time. We had to act swiftly, but also making sure that we did it in an authentic and empathetic way to those employees that were leaving, our organisation. And that was an emotional time.
Yeah.
And we still think back to that and say, gee whiz, I hope we never go through that again.
Yeah. Now, I might finish on this. Looking ahead, we have a World Cup here. We have the Gabba getting redeveloped, which is an exciting time for not only yourself but the whole of Queensland. What are you looking forward to the most in the next, well, let's say 5 years before the Gabba gets redeveloped? But we're looking at the Allan Border Field getting redone as well, which is going to be fantastic for the public eye. More people at that field is going to be fantastic. It's in a lovely local area. What are you looking forward to in the future?
There's many things to be optimistic about, and there's plenty of stuff to get excited about as well. Look, in the first instance, in really short term, cricket's back. Our men's and women's team are playing. We're not too far off the Big Bash League, starting with our women's Brisbane Heat team and then into our men's. What I'm looking forward to the most is being more competitive this year and greater consistency, I guess, from our men's and women's team, who've got some incredible talent and some brand new talent coming through. I'm looking forward to many of our players performing, having the internationals back, both in our women's and men's program in the Brisbane Heat, but really to be able to put on a show and put smiles on young girls and boys' faces, mate, when they see the Brisbane Heat win. I guess more in the sort of medium term, we don't yet know where we're going to be playing or what displacement looks like from the Gabba. We're certainly excited that we're going to have a new stadium, a world-class stadium, which is really important for both cricket and for AFL here in Brisbane, and the plans look incredibly exciting. The uncertainty for us, which is extremely complex, and we are entering uncertain times, is where do we play? Where does AFL play and where does cricket play when the Gabba comes down for anywhere between sort of 4 and 5 years as the rebuild? For us, we've been really deliberate on saying that our preference is Allan Border Field. We can only get 3,500 fans in there at the moment. Our expectation is that we will need sort of funding from a displacement point of view to get upwards of 10,000 fans into Allan Border Field. And that's not going to be a stadium. That's going to be a 10,000 seat precinct where fans can come and watch the Brisbane Heat play. And it's important that we keep cricket at a state and national and international level in Brisbane when the Gabba's getting redeveloped. And we've got an outstanding field and outstanding training facilities at Allan Border Field. We think it'll be really cost effective. We just need to get a few more seats in there.
Yeah.
And of course, over the next month or so, we're expecting to hear whether the Olympics, whether cricket will be in the Olympics in LA.
Yeah.
And we're expecting probably in the next month or so in India for that to be announced. And if cricket is successful to go into the LA Olympics, we'd imagine it's T20. There'll be women and men's teams. I suspect there'll be some pre-qualifying beforehand, but it puts us in a really great position then to be able to talk to those decision makers about cricket being in the Olympics here in Brisbane, which that will also help a range of cricket facilities, throughout Queensland be upgraded. So all of those Olympic cricket matches can be played here in Queensland, whether it's in Brisbane or regional Queensland, which have got some great locations in, Mackay and Townsville and also Cairns.
Exciting times, mate, that's for sure.
Much to look forward to.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing an insight into what is such a proud and successful organisation. So thank you very much, Terry.
Great. Thanks, Cooper. Thanks for having me to